Hi everyone, today's episode we're looking at the failed brake lights on the R56 Mini, and that leads us to look into dielectric grease. So what I get is when I turn the car on, we get the warning from the car telling me that one of the lights is out. This has been the little front side lights in the fog lights, mainly because moisture gets in those. But recently it is the brake lights. Now I replaced one of these less than a year ago and the contacts have burnt through. It seems to be a common problem with the Gen 2 Mini. The contacts just burn out. Now what tends to happen is a little bit of corrosion builds up, and that creates resistance, and with the resistance in the electrical circuit that creates heat. And on the Mini's rear lights, on particularly the brake lights, it actually melts the plastic inside the fitting. And that prevents you from pulling out the socket that holds the lamp and replacing it. So what you have to do is remove the trim piece from around the light fitting, and then that allows you access to the Torx fittings behind there. There's only 3. Unscrew that, the whole light comes off. And then you can disconnect the plug socket and then work on the light fitting. So what I did last time was just replace the connector, and I think I flattened out maybe a bit of the plastic. But what I didn't do was take apart the light fitting itself. So to do that, again, using a screwdriver, just carefully prise open the clips around the electrical component, and that separates from the main red bulk unit of the light itself. And then you can get direct access to the connectors that the sockets for the lamps fit into, and you can see the corrosion. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be looking at dielectric grease, which you may or may not have come across. There's a few myths about it. Dielectric grease is not conductive. All dielectric grease really does is keep moisture, oxygen and strong chemicals out of an electrical connection, which may cause it to corrode, which then leads to poor connections and failures of lights or systems or whatever it may be. A dielectric grease is a little different to petroleum jelly, or Vaseline it's more commonly known, which people do put on battery terminals to stop them corroding, and it has kind of the same effect. But dielectric grease is specifically made for this purpose, in that it's a bit thicker, it doesn't melt down with heat, also not being petroleum based, it's actually silicon based. It is potentially friendlier to components. Some plastics and rubbers may react with a petroleum jelly, so it's safer in that respect. Obviously it's a bit more expensive. You can use Vaseline, it does the same kind of thing, and the principle is the same. It excludes water, oxygen and other chemicals that may attack the electrical connection. To clean the contacts, I used a fiberglass pencil, rubbing it backwards and forwards, and then used the dielectric grease and smeared that over the area for the connection, so that that clean area is all nicely protected on both sides of that fitting. And then reassemble the components, putting the sockets back in with the lamps. In hindsight, I think I probably should have put some dielectric grease around the actual lamps themselves. That might help in future, and I might just go back and do that too. Testing it before clipping it back together, just to make sure everything works. And then reassemble the lamp, clicking back together the electrical component to the main light body, fitting the light back in after connecting up the connector, and then screwing it back on and clipping the cover back on. And we will see, once that's now fitted, how long this one lasts, whether this is going to burn out as well. Hopefully the exclusion of any elements to corrode the connection will stop it from getting hot when it's got a poor connection. Now, reading more about the dielectric grease in fixing the Mini has also got me thinking about the Midget. Now, when we first got the Midget out, a lot of the electrical components didn't work. So the lights didn't work initially, the windscreen wipers didn't work, and that came back down to the fuse box, which is in the top corner of the bonnet up here. And that had just mild corrosion and a little bit of wiggling of the cables. Everything sort of came back to life again, and that was fine. And that's just removing, that wiggling is just removing that corrosion, allowing it to work again. So after doing the Mini and reading up about dielectric grease, I'm going to go over the Midget and apply grease to the electrical connectors, particularly on that fuse box that has been problematic in the past and obviously was this time when getting it back into service and checking it off the MOT. There are various schools of thought on how to apply the grease, and some of them I don't agree with. So with sockets, people seem to be sort of covering it to make a seal between the sockets, but then the cables at the back are completely open. That seems completely pointless. The electrical connection is potentially compromised by water coming up the cable side and into the connection. Fine if it's connected from the actual mating face side, but the other end is free. So I think what I will do, put it into the connector a little bit, so that there's an element of connector that when they're pushed together, they have grease around that bit. This end, not too worried about, and again that end, it's that electrical connection, the metal to metal contact in the middle. So all of that is kind of encompassed in grease. So that's it for today. It wasn't a particularly long thing to look at, but hopefully you found that interesting and dispelled some of those myths about dielectric grease. We've got a second lockdown here in the UK. We'll see how it goes, but it's a really suspension teardown. I've been putting it off because I've really been hoping to try and get into competition this year, which is one of the reasons I started the channel, is I really wanted to show the sort of cheap motorsport that you can do with a car like the Midget. And looking at that, I'm considering putting the Mini into the same competitions. The events that I'm looking at, you generally have to drive your car to the event, so I can't drive two cars. So if I can't get the Midget back on the road in time, I might put the Mini in and just see how that goes. The teardown of the suspension to get the knocking sorted on the Midget, I think this could be quite a lengthy process. There's quite a bit of sort of light rust in there that I also want to look at. I've done some trials with some rusty old horseshoes, which is quite interesting. I'll show you that in a future episode on the channel. Some products that essentially just dissolve the rust. It's very effortless. So that's one to come. Right, thanks very much for watching. Hope you found that interesting. See you again soon.